Good morning and welcome to another discussion on managing life's changes. And it's interesting that we've only been producing this particular venue and on this platform for about 4 days. And a few people have connected with me offline and they like the scenery, the ocean. One person even said, I've noticed that it's not a still photograph. Moreover, it's a video. They could actually see the waves. Isn't that interesting? The waves of communications, airwaves, energy waves. They're all forms of communication. This morning's discussion, communicating through the noise. And there is so much information on this. I wanted to start off with a few questions for you to consider. And while I do that, I also want to preface it with a very short story about one of our dogs, Sanji, which is a bull mastiff. He is a bull mastiff. He is a rescue, as in most of our animals. And what's interesting about the title, Communicating Through the Noise, and how Sanji communicates with us when there's thunder. Those of you who have animals and are aware of, pay attention to their behavior as actual warning signs. You know, everyone wants to run to the electronic devices, the doorbells, the electronic sensors. Our cell phones have turned into mini warning devices. Well, animals do the same thing, especially in the morning, which the birds have already started chirping, and it's obviously 6 o'clock. They probably start about 4:34, 4:35, sometimes a late start at about 4:44. They're communicating to us. And in many cases, we don't have to go off to some junket or some foreign land to reflect, pause, and hear life through the noise, communicating through the noise. Yes, there are always going to be interruptions. Yes, there are always going to be background sounds. I've even prefaced in this program, every now and again, you're going to hear my dogs. You're going to hear my cats. You're going to hear some things that are going to be seemingly distracting. Yet, if we stay on point, as in business, as in raising a family, as in managing state of mind, then we discount that distraction. Back to Sanji. So every time there's thunder that we hear, and even though we may have missed the precursor, the lightning, Sanji gets upset. And we know there's a difference with someone coming to the door, the dogs in the neighborhood, some of them perambulate freely on the street, while others are managed accordingly by their owners. Sanji has taken this to a whole other level where we've actually had to purchase what they call thunder jackets, where the dog is wrapped, it's like a blanket, and it's wrapped so the wavelength of that noise doesn't hit the dog as much or as intently. Isn't that the same interpretation, the same recognition of when you're working and someone interrupts you? Isn't that the same skill set that when there are noises and there's nothing you can do about it? We live next to Fort Dix, McGuire Air Force. The other night, I'm working with a client late into the evening, and one of their huge cargo planes flies over, and I mean low. If I had a 100-foot stick, I could probably poke the plane. Well, they're coming into land and there's very little you can do. No, we're not next to an airport. We're next to a military base. There's nothing you can do. They've been around a lot longer. We've only been here 17 years. You could put a whole bunch of zeros on the end of that. I've spoken to people where generations of their family have been stationed there. So there's nothing you can do. So communicating through the noise, once again, you're setting up an understanding of what may be expected, what is typically expected, and wild cards. I love the phrase the other. And I took that from NASA when, in some of their earlier years, they would make a laundry list, right? Like in project management, these are the things that are going to go into this project to make it successful. And there's always an other. In negotiations, there's an other. In social science projects, big science projects where they're building out cities for the first time, there's always an other, right? In construction, there's always an other. So let's jump right in. I have to watch the dashboard because every now and again someone sends a message, and I have been remiss in missing it. This is fresh stuff. I'm not going to ask for your forgiveness. I'm not going to ask for you to be gentle with me. I'm just going to tell you what I see, how I feel about these things, and I'm learning. I'm enjoying the medium. It is a compilation of radio, audio side, video, visual, and all this technical stuff, right? All this technical stuff that we have to pay attention to. If you give yourself that space, give yourself that recognition. For example, I asked my wife, Miriam, I said, Miriam, half an hour or so before the program, I need to be quiet. And so she does that, right? Because I ask, right? The rest of the day is open because we have business, we have appointments, we have everything that you have. Perhaps the only real difference is how you introduce yourself to each and every day. I'll bet meditation, my Malanga tea, right? There it is. And it says here on the cup, just in case for those who are slogan readers, the cat loves me best. Well, actually, the cat loves Miriam, my wife, best, because I'll tell you right now, this is the first time I've ever seen a cat open the bathroom door. We have a sliding door. It's a wooden sliding door, goes into a pocket, and the cat knows how to put its paw under the door, slide it to the left, because the door goes from left to right, and he pushes the door open. Unbelievable. Now, not all the way, just I think about maybe 5-6 inches, enough for the cat to get in. So I gotta watch out. So let's talk about communicating through the noise. Communicating through the noise. So I'd like you to write down an example of a change that you've experienced that you welcome. Right? A change that's happened in your life that you orchestrated. Going to school, going to work, finding a job, finding a mate, removing yourself from a relationship, removing yourself from an association, discounting all those people on LinkedIn telling you, oh my goodness, LinkedIn said you're a perfect match for me, so let's connect. No background supporting, no evidence why we should, no identity of what we have in common. Just LinkedIn said so. Just as the phrase they love to use, I love to build my network. I want you on my hook. That's another topic. That's a whole other topic. So, communicating through the noise, I'd like you to write down an example of a change that you've experienced in your life that you welcomed. Secondly, I'd like you to write down an experience of a change or event that was planned for. One is welcomed. It happened. You may not have planned for it. And the second one is you actually constructed your consciousness, your mind, and decided this is what I want. And then the third one is share an example, what we refer to as a wicked or tsunami change that was totally out of the blue. And as you're doing this, feel the experience, feel your emotions, feel how your primordial self and academic intellectual self presented themselves. In medicine, we say a patient presents. Also, I believe in psychology, they present with. So I want you to hold those memories, those experiences, and most importantly, identify what was the mental process. And we're going to come back to that, and we're going to ask a few pointed questions, and you're going to see why this is so powerful, that at any time during the day, you decide. Just as if I'm upset with my wife, I pull myself away. Whether I'm right or wrong, I just pull myself away. Give that space. It's the silence between the notes. You've heard that expression. That gives the meaning to the tune, to the sound itself. The deal here is what you are told in life by others, society, culture, family, instruction, how you are instructed. Now, theology, academics, uh, social narration, right? How society speaks to you, how they identify you and put you in the proverbial box, how cultural mapping, your own group, your own immediate group. We'll talk about race in another program because we need some biology, evidence based, that we are one. I'm afraid the outer skin is just a clothing, it's haberdashery. Um, so, from those three questions, I'm now asking you to consider and reflect on what you are told, right, from other people, how you're instructed, and those 4 or 5 different categories, what you experience. What you're told and what you experience is typically very different, and how you're told from different organizations, how you are instructed, how you are brought into an organization, what people and how people share different levels of information for you to act and act upon, and how life itself plays out. They all need to be aligned, right? They all need to be aligned. They all need to make sense. And in many cases, you're the instrument, or rather, you take yourself as the instrument to be tuned, right? So if you think about how life is playing out on you, and you're saying, well, what is this going to do with communications? Well, what have you been told about life, about certain groups of people, about certain experiences, about taking an exam, about working in an environment, by reading reviews of customer service or buying, selling, benefiting from, even especially volunteering work? How are you instructed? Does someone come down and be like drum, boom, 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 or are they laissez-faire? Are they emotionally intelligent to ask engaging questions as opposed to Neanderthal, bark, 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 junkyard dog? Sorry, canines. I hate to insult you in that fashion. You should say junkyard humans. What has your experience been to date? Is it pleasurable? Is it something that you can manage? Is it something that you communicate to yourself each and every day? Man, I want more of this. I want to get out there and do this again. I love that environment. Or is it the opposite? Is it sustainable for you? That's a conversation, internal self-talk. How life plays out. 63 going on 6. Why would I say that? What does that really mean? It means that I feel despite the challenges, despite some of the trauma, despite many of the negative things I've experienced, by and large, I'm still willing to stay in the game. That's got to be the most important communication you have with yourself. I've worked with a number of different communities, and I have done it and I will continue to do it so that I have a tactile feel of human engagement, the human condition, the communities that impact my life, whether I know it or not, whether it's through taxation, whether it's through legislation, whether it's through uh, socialization when you go into a work environment, when you go into a volunteering environment. The communication that comes back to me tells me where society is. Just as the last 4 years told us, yeah, we are very primitive, we are very insecure, we are very, we really haven't moved very far because of the extent of that negative behavior that has been exhibited, that has been voiced and allowed to manifest. It is actually stinking thinking, because we know there's more than enough resources on this planet for everyone to have a very good lifestyle. And I'm not talking wealth of money or economic stratification. So this all needs to be aligned, and this is the challenge. This is the opportunity that every single day we wake up and we go for it, just like the birds outside. They don't have a legislative body to help them. They don't have ombudsman. They don't have homes to go in when there's bad weather or conditions are unfavorable. They persevere. They are totally focused, and we can take that, even if it is an instinctual programming of their DNA, of their existence. We can take that as the so-called higher form of life, so-called higher form of life, and affect it every single day. And if we can't, we need to learn how to. We can be programmed as we have been. So that is kind of the meat and potatoes of the discussion. I'm now going to overlay that with an article from the Harvard Business Review. I've been subscribing to this forever. I think the papers present their case. They do show some research evidence, background, why this is the findings. And then for me, it allows me to assess, gauge, just like these questions. How has life played out for me? Is this my reality? And if it's not, and I want it, how do I get there? And that's really the value that we bring when we do workshops, when we do, even especially the remote virtual. We're showing people that you can still be effective. You can still use verbal engagement. You can still use physical enhancing methods to stay in touch with your audience. So in this post-traumatic growth, in this post-traumatic time, the article says the global pandemic, economic collapse, and new reminders of perennial racial injustice and police violence. It sounds like a flower. Perennial racial injustice. For those who are into horticulture, this July, rates of depression and anxiety in the US were more than triple those of early 2019. The simple question, how are you, has turned into an emotional minefield. And we speak about that in solution focused brief therapy, because instead of saying, how are you, where the client is coming in with a problem, the client is coming to you for solutions. And we'll talk about methodology in a moment. The client is coming into you for solutions. When you go into your supervisor and say, I have a challenge here, I need your help. When you go into a manager, a meeting, and they're trying to address a business challenge, a project challenge, a client, a customer concern, a project issue in production operations, what have you, in manufacturing, it is the way of that leader and how they respond and their level of security in you and in their ability to communicate what is needed, that can, in many cases, escalate the situation to where it becomes worse. So we go back to that phrase, emotional and intellectual intelligence, right? How do we show the team that we are as one and we're not going to backstab each other? I had a conversation with a lady the other day, and she works in another part of the world, and women are getting exposure to opportunities that they never had before. And she said it is incredible how cannibalistic some of the women are. And I'm not surprised, simply because when you're from a suppressed environment and the door is open to opportunities, your recall of what is successful comes to the fore, right? Comes to the front of your ability, your skill sets. And that's how you think. You think you need to castrate the next person. You have to backstab the next person, which unfortunately is still very predominant in the business world. Lifting up is a unique experience. If you're in that kind of company, that's great. I'll tell you, you see it when you're buying coffee. You see it when you're in the supermarket. You see it when you're getting your glass windshield changed, and the technician is talking to an operations manager who's talking to perhaps a business unit manager, and neither one of those higher up representatives wish to speak to you, the customer. They put the responsibility, we talked about yesterday, the monkey on the back, on that technician. Very unfair. So for you as a consumer, you have to be astute to that business strategy, right? And you have to take it upline, of which I did. Obviously, I'm venting. So during 2001, researchers surveyed thousands of Americans across the country because of the World Trade Center, a disaster, the attack. And what they found was that the ability for people to look beyond and understand the experience, beyond and understand the experience, right? So that those two are crucial. You look beyond it and you understand. How do you understand that kind of event? For me, we had the same thing in England in the 70s. England and Northern Ireland were fighting for ownership. Ended up 4 counties in Northern Ireland are still part of the British Empire. So my experience, my reflection on that is such that this is something that happens when you suppress other people, when you limit or control or force them into the proverbial corner. Right or wrong, that's what happens. And we've seen it around the world. We see it right now in Thailand, right? We see it with any group, any culture that has been suppressed for a long time. So we have to release those gases. We have to release that pressure. What is interesting is that post-traumatic syndrome is the most well-known outcome of trauma and often presents as long-term debilitating difficulties in recovery. Right? So when you've gone through these experiences, there has to be a safe haven. There has to be people that can not just sympathize, rather can speak to the emotional challenges and then build a path, future best self. And that's what solution focused grief therapy is really all about. There are going to be events and experiences that the communications are just not going to work. The experience is going to be very unpleasant. And the research shows, as certainly this does, we have to change the narrative. It's like constantly talking about negative things and people that are around you. Those that can literally create a lead wall to stop that noise, that reverberation, find that they can then focus on what they would like to do, achieve, work on, think about, experience. And we have that choice. We have that ability. It goes on to say no one will choose to endure trauma, but it's helpful to keep in mind that even terrible moments can have positive effects. For all of its horrors, the COVID-19 pandemic has forced many of us into a more sustainable way of life. How many of us have recognized that nature has come back into parks, across highways, even in public venues such as malls? Nature reclaims its land. So that also sends us a message, a communication that says, we are visitors, we are tenants. I know a lot of people push back on that. No, 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 this is our land, right? We fight each other for what is not ours. That's a form of communication. That is communicating through the noise. Nature takes back. We saw that with Mount St. Helens. We saw that with Chernobyl. We saw that with 3 Mile Island. We see that even with war, where land and property is decimated, nature reclaims it. That is because nature is focused on existence, on life. And if we can communicate that to ourselves, higher conversation, elevate the conversation, then all this stinking thinking, all this you got, I got, they do this, they do that, is pushed to the side. When we look at the research and not just look at it as, well, this is what the research says, because we know people can create data, people can create a story, a narrative that takes you down the path they want to take you. On the other hand, when you look at nature itself, it communicates everything we need to be sustainable, healthy, and safe. And here, even though this pandemic has changed our mental deficiency, I call it a mental deficiency because we think in a way that's not sustainable. The positive side is you hear nature coming back, and nature is absolute. You hear that the air quality has already improved over many cities. You hear that people are not as anxious. Now, ironically, the other day when I was waking up, it was about a week ago, I think now, maybe not so much a whole week, but a while ago. And I was saying, wow, where's all this noise coming from? And it was about 5:45, 6 o'clock in the morning. A lot of people in our area, in our community, have started going back to work. And I distinctively noticed a very large increase in automobile noise because we're in a fairly rural environment. So any human movement with our cars is noticeable. So again, that's a communication that tells us, is this the way we want to be? Is this what we want to experience? And those of us who can move out of the noisy environments, whatever they are, and I was born in the city, London, I came to America, New York. Can't get much more city than New York. Some people call it a whole other planet, right? Um, Also, the anguish over police killings of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Rashad Brooks, and too many others have galvanized what was considered diverse groups. Because the one communication there is we're human beings. I've always been fascinated. Another reason why I've chosen managing change through effective communications is that over the decades and centuries, quite frankly, there are groups of people that are always put upon, right? Whether they're economically challenged, socially ostracized, culturally despised. And now today with technology, I'm still surprised that people don't communicate and say, let's stop buying, because that's the underlying strength of these capitalistic systems, right? I'm part of the system. I'm not discounting that. Why don't they stop buying those products. That's how you dismantle this cannibalistic system. We won't get into that too deep right now, but that's my quick summary there. We can communicate together as we've never in the world, right? We know Syria, was it Egypt, if I'm not mistaken, and one other country, they all had civil unrest and they ostracized, they tore down a totalitarian dictatorship type um, leadership through social media. That is communicating through the noise. That is using the technology to their advantage. And we can do that. The last 4 years, it's been the reverse. They've used social media to disrupt us, to pit us against one another. And it's sad because when I go out and I'm like in a local Wawa store, I can speak to pretty much anybody. There was a gentleman, he had his overalls on, and I can't remember what kicked off the conversation. We started talking about his goats, for goodness sake. My wife has rabbits. We have farmers who have uh, roosters and chickens. And we talk, well, where do you get your eggs from? What about your duck eggs as opposed to chicken eggs? They're bigger, they're thicker. And we have a conversation. And that takes away the noise of saying, oh, we're different. We may do things slightly differently. We may think how to achieve things differently. At the same time, there's an opening, there's a discourse when we don't take those openings and have a good conversation, have a meaningful conversation. At a gas station, talk to a young attendant. I said, are you in school? He said, yeah. Well, guess what? I've been having a conversation for literally 2 years with a young lady in another Wawa store, and she's going to school for accounting. I shared with her the New Jersey chapter. She didn't know about the New Jersey chapter. Are you kidding me? You're going to school for accounting, and the school or the instructor or the department hasn't connected with the accounting board that is in every state. There's a chapter. Meaningful networking. Back to that LinkedIn experience I mentioned earlier, right? So these forms of communications disrupts the noise that we hear from media, and it gives you more of a true experience of how people behave and the concerns that we exhibit, right? Affirmed values, right? Leaders can and should take this moment to affirm their organizational values through exemplary, actionable behavior. Don't say you're about Black Lives Matter only because the tempo, the voice of the people have raised to such a level that you can't avoid it. What is your HR policy on so-called minorities, people of color? What an insult. People of color. I didn't know we were a crayon box. The last thing I heard, white is a color. All right, rein that in. No, do not rein it in. Express it. Express yourself. Dun, 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 dun. I had to do that. Sorry. Multiple personalities. Sometimes we can manage them, sometimes we can't. But we temper them. So the leadership aspect of managing through the noise is really looking into the past. Have you exhibited that behavior all along? Are you aware that this type of angst in people has been around forever? It's not new. Colleges have communicated their preference to benefiting from slavery, for example. Cultures and economic forces have expressed their preference to suppressing other groups, so-called minority groups, because it makes economic sense. Apartheid, people will say immediately, well, apartheid is abolished. Really? Okay, so someone needs a study in diplomacy, in social and cultural ethics, and in the history of mankind to one another, because it doesn't just disappear. It's not an oven where you turn it off and the heat goes down. These behaviors, these institutional and social energies that have been supported for decades don't just get turned off. And it's seen in the reflection is seen in the socialization of communities, the behavior of us, both in public and in private. You know, who was that? I don't know who the politician was many years ago, said Sunday is the most segregated day of the year because we go off to our little temples, we go off to our little churches, we go off to our little mosques. Emphasize community. Survivors are more likely to experience PTG when they have a supportive community, right? Which they can openly share experiences. Now, this is where it gets a little tricky because everybody wants to say their experience is the right experience. And they want everyone to be kind of a kumbaya. Right? In the study, psychologists surveyed residents of Madrid following the 2004 terrorist bombing in the city. At 1, 3, and 8 weeks after the event, the attack socially magnetized Spaniards who immediately after talked more about and more often of their neighbors, friends, and family about their emotions. So how can we keep that going? Not just when we are traumatized. Moreover, in the morning, meditation. When you go out and you speak with someone, when you engage with someone, I'm fixing my tire, I'm getting my car registered, I'm helping my child, my daughter to register for college. I am speaking to someone for technical assistance about one of my computers. I am calling up customer service regarding my bill. I am talking with my mortgage company, my appraiser, my realtor. How can we make that conversation earnest and keep that flow, that energy without it being burdensome? You know, I've heard the expression, people are like, oh, that's too much work. Interesting, interesting. Too much work. Let's see what time we are. I had a image that I was trying to upload and I was not able to. And it speaks to those 3 questions I asked you. I'm going to come back to those 3 questions. An example of a change that was welcomed, not planned for, just welcomed. It happened. Then I asked you to write out the experience of a change or an event that was actually planned for. You mentally created it, right? You know, we talk about dreams and aspirations. Some people belittle those things. Yet if you think about the physical structures and certainly the social programs that are in place, it was all a dream, an idea, a construct, a concept, if you will. Share an example of a wicked or tsunami type change. Now, what we've discussed briefly, how were those experiences? And how can you take one interpretation, the preference, and overlay that with those that were not as welcome? How can you shore up? How can you counter those negative experiences? And even though a lot of times, that's said categorically, it's humility. It's understanding that we are fallible. It's understanding that we are mortal and that we're going to die. We are immortal. I think I said it right, right? I'm sure I'll get some comments about that one. So let's take a look at where this can take us, right? So we've spoken about communication through the noise. We laid out 3 scenarios and asked you to remember that experience, recall that experience. We said that what we're told, how we're instructed, what our personal experiences have been, and how life has actually played out for us, all of those need to be aligned, right? We have to perhaps discard some of the instruction, social, family, theological instruction. Yes, we have to discard those because life itself, our personal experiences are not compatible. And that takes strength, that takes courage. We then shared one report, which there are many out here, many, 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 um, and found that once again, it is community, it is those leaders in our world that allow for us to discover what it is that we're all about, right? If you're telling someone what to do all the time, then how can they grow? How can they find enrichment if you're telling them what they have to do, how things are done? Again, through much of my coaching work, it's asking people to reach out to a safe haven that they evaluate, that they can trust, right? It's also using solution focused brief therapy. For example, you might say to somebody, who in your life would be most instrumental in helping you achieve what it is that you're trying to do, right? Even though they've come to you for help, you're taking them back into their community. You're taking them back into a place that you're not familiar with, that you have not been allowed to come into. That's a powerful experience. That's a powerful communication to them to say, you have a community that I'm sure you value, that there are one or two or three or four people that you can call on, that you respect, that they want to see the best in you. And some people might say, well, no, I don't have anyone like that. It sets the conversation and their mind to search and identify. And if they do have a potential, they then can say, okay, I want to develop that relationship. I want to cultivate, right? I want to network on purpose. You can also ask the question, what would it feel like if you were able to communicate more effectively with your manager, with your team, right? It would ask that meaning. Now we've got, hold on, let me do this real quick. All right, that's gonna stop. Let's see if that'll stop that. My printer is doing a little job here, so you're gonna hear some noise in the background. In the meantime, that's one of those situations where it occurs, right? That's a communication challenge. So we acknowledge it, we give it the time to play out, and instead of escalating the situation, we say to ourselves, okay, it's a small interruption for a short period of time, and we'll come back, we'll circle back to our original direction, and not be overly burdened, not allow the noise to take over the conversation. And that takes a certain maturity, right? If you're working away and your child runs in, you take a pause, you take a comma, if you will, know where you've been interrupted, address the situation. Once it's addressed or at least been minimized, then you come back to what you're addressing, what you're talking about. We'll have to wait a little bit because I know that noise is being picked up, right? It's been picked up. Let me share with you then a little video clip while that's doing its thing. This is a little video clip on a service we offer. All right. That is a little program that we have been providing for about a year and a half now. And it pulls together four aspects of our existence, of our needs. You see, it still wants to work over here, but we've minimized the disruption there. Let's see. Well, there you go. Let's see what we can do there. Hold up. Let's just close it down. There you go. Gotta love technology, right? Be careful when you set up these automated printing and interfaces and synchronizing devices. Sometimes that will happen. The video I just played is a program that we offer that addresses four elements of our life, and you'll see that in our newsletter. We talk about you, the individual, the id, because that's where it all starts, right? That is the nexus point. And we address much of the topics that we have been discussing on a very individual basis. And that's the difference. We can set out a template, we can set out a course. I do believe we've come to a point in man's development that we should accommodate the meaning of society to the individual, culture to that individual as it's morphed, as uh, people have moved and migrate to other countries and then pick up relationships, develop relationships. We talk about theology because that is a very um, instrumental aspect of our lives, right? We talk about our career and business opportunities. More and more people are developing businesses because of technology, because of social media, because of being able to reach smaller groups that make their business enjoyable, that make it both financially feasible um, at a younger age. We don't have to wait until we come out of college or graduate school or have many years in a particular profession or industry. And then we talk about life perspectives because I've even heard 15 and 20-year-olds talk about life in a retro way, right? So when we come back to that communicating through the noise, well, guess what? A lot of that is listening to people who are from different groups, different cultures, different age groups, not a gap, not a generation gap, but rather different age group. Um, and we look for that common thread. We look for that commonality. That is managing change for success. Nobody really wants to change, by the way. Nobody wants to change. We'll engage, we'll explore options, we will look for common areas, and we'll even identify areas of disparity with the intent to understand where that's coming from. And by and large, it's a desire to have access um, to experience, to be part of, right? Those are all human emotions, and we bring those into the workplace. We bring those into our relationships, and many times it may take years for an underlying meaning to manifest, right? You know the expression, "Oh, I never expected that behavior from this person." Oh, that's not me. Yes, it is. Under these circumstances, this is how you have decided to behave until you engage on purpose when you're turned on. So let's continue here. I think we've arrested the machinery in the office, so it won't interrupt us. Of course, the cell phone has its own its own track to play on. First jobs lackadaisical clothing store. So here's a little note I wrote down about today's discussion when we talk about communicating through the noise. And it's interesting how I've recognized certain seemingly repetitive expressions of people of which I have truly ignored. One of my first jobs in London was with a men's haberdashery clothing store. And I was told that all I was supposed to do was inventory and stacking and folding clothes, men's sweaters. And it wasn't like a Paul Stewart or Madison Avenue or Harrods, which I eventually went to work for. It was, I would say, a middle of the road men's clothing store. Well, because some of the other salespeople were so um, slow in serving customers and or assess them as worthy to be served. And you've seen that in the retail. That's why I think retail, the demise of retail has been so drastic, even though, of course, the cost of real estate, the development of delivering goods with better service through social media, internet, has certainly cut into it. I believe that there is still that need, and evidenced by the COVID, where people want to come out and engage with one another. It is the level at which we decide to engage. Ironically, even with Neiman Marcus supposedly delivering that higher level of service, they've had to reevaluate their operations. What I found was people would come up to me because I was on the floor. I was moving around the floor, and they'd ask me for help. And the store manager would always jump in and say, "No, he's not a salesperson." And I remember one conversation, one response from a customer was, he may not be a salesperson, but he's helping me." Absolutely brilliant. And all I was doing was helping the customer. And I loved fashion. I did a few articles for GQ at the time when I came over to the States. And it was that recognition by the customer that I felt was more important than the instruction from the store manager. And we always butted heads, even when I left. We butted heads. To me, that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. I'm not going to bow down to someone who is insecure. I'm not going to bow down to someone who doesn't understand the environment that they work in. Also, working at a school for, actually, it was a workforce development initiative, and I was helping incumbent workers uh, who were being transitioned. They asked me to come in and work with them to find them opportunities, help them navigate the path. And certainly technology was part of it because many of them did not use computers and internet and social media and job placement platforms on an everyday basis. So it was a bit of a challenge, certainly initiated by the unplanned tsunami of change that was put upon them. And I found once again that going deeper into why they wanted those jobs, so they wouldn't replicate the vulnerability that they had already experienced. Um, I was told again that wasn't necessary yet. If you think of managing change through effective communications, that was exactly what they needed, so that they could feel at least confident that they weren't just another brick in the wall, right? We go for these jobs and we kind of repeat that same Achilles heel mentality, vulnerability, and we wonder why our life is a narrative already played, like a deja vu, if you will. Also, working with youth, I was told by an associate, not higher up than me, but certainly had more years in the profession, to stay in my lane. My response was, "They are my lane." In Toastmasters, we have a period in the meeting that's called table topics. And table topics are a quick 2-minute talk on a topic. And the Toastmaster of the evening will usually give the theme, a number of questions, and they can come from truly an eclectic base of subjects and categories. One thing about table topics, like a good politician, is when you're asked to talk on, let's say, the meaning of ducks in winter, you can totally change the question. You can totally change the topic upon which you're speaking for those 2 minutes. And that's what I felt I did when I was told, well, you need to stay in your lane. I changed the narrative. I changed the meaning. I did not go down saying, well, I have a certificate in such and such a field, or I have so many years in such and such a field, or this is part of my job description. And we've heard that one. It was simply a matter of, these are my lanes. These youth are my lanes. And I think that then transcends into your other worlds, right? Into your other areas of importance. I want to share this other story with you. Managing through the noise, we had our first medical delivery to the house. We normally go out to the pharmacy and pick up our prescriptions. And the gentleman asked my wife that he needed to take a photograph of her. Well, immediately alarms went off. Never heard this before in my life, right? Things are changing. You gotta flow with it. Called up the pharmacist, knew nothing about it. Got the name of the company that delivers for the pharmacy. Called them up. Weren't sure what the protocol is of their multiple national, regional, intergalactic service runners, right? The people that actually deliver the prescriptions. Found the company. I was referred to the company. I called the number, went through a multiple series levels of people, representatives of the company, and found out that indeed it was protocol. The issue here is to find out whether that form of communication was correct and established. Because if it wasn't, then I would be concerned. And that is cause for concern. I don't think it's being neurotic. I don't think it's being over concerned. I think it's the right thing to do to manage your environment, your engagement with this new world out here, right? We've known that there are scam artists, right? All the time. Greece, you're right at the top. You screwed Europe 3 times with multi-billion-dollar bailouts that the consumer will pay for one way or another. Madoff, classic, right? This gentleman in Japan most recently, classic stuff. What is it? Workspace? Is it workspace? Ba-boom. Total fraud, total bells and what is it? Mirrors, right? Unbelievable. If we are going to communicate through the noise, we have to be able to arrest the moment's frustration. We have to be able to pull back. We have to be able to de-escalate that need to react. Take a pause, take a deep breath. As they say in the media industry, nothing is as good nor as bad as first reported. So we're coming to the end of our program. I trust you will have a pleasant day. You will have prepared for it. Meditation, I hope, was in order. And we shall speak again tomorrow. This is Ronald Allen. Please check out the website, Ronald M. Allen. Check out the free resources, both for you, the individual, couples, families, very different dynamics, and the historical research on everything dealing with communications. And you'll find fairly broad inclusion from project management that I've been engaged in, mortgage banking, and how consumers see home ownership, experience home ownership, and or prepare for the different stages in home ownership. Those are crucial social engagement opportunities where we communicate, and in some cases, unfortunately, do not communicate. We have some great support material, managing change in 60-second audio files that you'll also see under the support tab. And if you are a buyer of services, whether it's coaching, mentoring, certainly the alignment optimization component of our services, please check out that tab, services. And if you have any questions, by all means, you can find me across social media, on my website. I'm not going to recite my email. You can see it in our signature areas, again, across all of our social interactions. So have a good day, enjoy. And as they say, managing change through effective communications. Let's see if we can play that little tagline I have. I created one, but sometimes I can't always find everything. Let's see where it is. Bada bing, bada boom. That's the audio. This is, you know what it is? These guys here. There you go. Managing change through effective communications. And one that I came up with, identifying intangible assets and producing tangible results. This came from the balance sheet of corporations, that intangible line item. And every now and again, I talk about that because people say, well, what does that mean? Well, the intangible value that a service, a product, a brand, an identity has created in the community is in many cases far more valuable and needs to be nurtured, needs to be cultivated. In communications, it is incredibly valuable. It's an intangible asset that produces a tangible result. Think about it this way. At the end of the day, when you're going home, you've had a challenge, but you've made it. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't to the level that you wanted, yet you've made it. And it's those intangible, intrinsic behaviors, thoughts, processes, strategies, technical, that you executed during the day that made you a success. That's the intangible. That's the brand value. That's the balance line item called good faith. So I will wish you a good day, and we'll do our little exit here. Gotta get better at this, no? I was much better when I did terrestrial. I was seeing it on a board. It was a deck. Take care. Let's see. The music back. There we go.